Our first conversation, we are joined by Secretary Linda McMahon. She joined us in our New York gathering virtually. She sat down with governors just last month in Santa Fe at the Western Governors Association. We are thrilled to have her with us here in Colorado Springs today. Please join me in giving a warm Colorado welcome to Secretary Linda McMahon. Thank you, Secretary McMahon. We want to begin with and probably many of our governors have heard. It's possible some haven't. We've been busy. There's some good news. And as you know, many of us were very worried about several title funds that our school districts had been expected that were formulaically distributed. It was top of mind for so many of us. And we're very pleased that you were able to announce earlier today that those funds have become unfrozen and will be quickly sent to school districts. So thank you.
Nice. Very happy about that.
My question is, if you can shed some light on how we can prevent these kinds of communications gaps or discrepancies in the first place, kind of how did this happen? Can you ensure that whatever the federal government is going to do in education, can we ensure that we kind of know it before, right? Because this is the biggest problem with this one is the school year, for many schools, they kind of start July 1st as teachers are coming back like next week. How can we better communicate to make sure this chaos and uncertainty doesn't occur again around funding and that people know things earlier?
Well, thank you very much. And it's a pleasure to be here with all of you. I've had the opportunity to meet with several of the governors one-on-one today, and I've enjoyed that very much. So thank you for your warm welcome and your hospitality. No guarantees for me that we'll eliminate all the communication gaps that do happen, but I can say part of it is just the transition aspect. The other aspect was that we took some time in the Office of Management Budget, took some time to really review the title funding, to look at all the programs, et cetera, before they were released. And so they were well satisfied. And so now those funds are going to be going out. I would think now we've reviewed them, looked at that process so that a year from now, we wouldn't find ourselves in the same situation. We
appreciate that. So on page 34, of our report, we talk about consider a more effective federal-state partnership in education. And two areas that the federal government has played a very important role, and I want to get your thoughts on the role going forward, is making sure that we are truly making progress for students in two ways. One is, if we are measuring a metric of improving graduation rates, we want to make sure that one way that states can do that is not simply to dumb down the standards and make it easier to graduate. If we are looking at improving math scores, we want to make sure the answer is not you make the math test easier. So the federal government has been the fair referee in that process through supporting NAEP, through supporting strong standards development at the state level. The second piece of the federal role the federal government has played is universality, meaning everybody needs to be tested, everybody should be accounted for, we need to look at the progress of every student. How do we make sure that states aren't able to say, we got results up because guess what, this 20% of the kids we swept under the rug, or we don't know where they are, we didn't look at them, and that's across every demographic. So how do you lean into making sure that whatever form it takes, the federal government can play a constructive role in being that fair referee and making sure that every student means every student?
Well, thank you for that. And we don't plan to make any changes in terms of eliminating those tests that are so critical. We've already renegotiated the NAEP contract, so that is going forward and ready to be implemented as you would have expected it would have been. I am pleased to say, though, that we did cut the cost of it quite a bit. So I think, a little pencil sharpening helped with that as well. So I'm glad about that. But the other testing that we'll be doing, there is some research that was going on that is not necessary. But in terms of the measurement and the outcomes and the accountabilities, that testing will go forward as the government's been doing that.
Yeah, and I think, we really hope that you lead into outcome-related testing and maybe results. And if there's a way, if you were looking at different inputs, and I'm sure maybe you point to some silly studies that were funded and probably shouldn't have been, we at least never take our eye from the ball in figuring out, does this work for student success? And frankly, that also means the federal government does have a role to play in better information systems and helping to make sure that the states are succeeding in that regard, as well as making sure that states are fairly assessing students. In a world where your department is stepping back from some of the research, some of the requirements, how can we make sure we emphasize and maybe even do more of holding our system accountable for high standards and outcomes, universal service of students to achieve what are truly national competitiveness goals, right? We want to be competitive as a nation. Yes, that's a sum total of the states doing their job, the districts doing their job at the classroom level, the teacher doing the job, but it is also the nation. And how do you think about that?
What would be your suggestion?
So look, I mean, where states benefit the most is when you can make investments either with us or on your own in data and information that directly records and makes transparent the outcomes of education in these areas that we've identified. And I mentioned them earlier today. We kind of have 4 of them. One, I think we do, academic foundations. Could it be done better? Possibly. But fundamentally, we do measure whether students are learning math, whether they're learning reading. We need to do better. And that's one of our areas of focus. And I want to make sure nobody thinks that by saying that there's other things we need to do that, you know, we don't need to focus on those. We all agree. Kids need to read and write. Post-secondary and workforce preparedness. And you've talked about this. I think each governor has an exciting story to tell, but how do we measure this? And how can the federal government help working with the states and saying our kids graduating high school or community college with a credential or certificate that helps them get a job? Lifelong well-being. Harder one, but that also, you know, it impacts the Department of Health and many others. How do we make sure folks are mentally healthy, are able to be productive workers and society members and Americans? And then finally, civic engagement. How do we make sure that they also feel part of our nation as we near our 250th birthday? And so, I guess I'd love to hear kind of what you think about that output from our, do you see opportunities to partner in all those areas around better making sure we're achieving good results?
Well, and thank you for bringing up those different areas. I'm not sure that we today have that kind of testing in place. If you're familiar with one, then please share.
Yep.
But it may be that we look at the kind of data we're gathering and that we restructure the kind of testing that we're doing. I'd actually like to put that out, to maybe it's IES to take a look at structuring and giving us some opportunity to how we could measure that. Is it not only students who are graduating with the certificate, but then they go on and we measure the economic impact that has brought, with that certificate, or what that student was able to get a job for, what the cost of living was in their area and how that was impacted. Maybe that's something that we could take a look at.
Now, many governors and states are doubling down on apprenticeship, dual enrollment, concurrent enrollment, career-connected learning. How do you view the role of Department of Ed and your sister departments, Department of Labor and Department of Commerce? How do you view their role in helping to support a coherent education to workforce strategy that includes employers and businesses at the table to help drive outcomes that meet our economic needs?
Yeah, well, now you're talking about one of my sweet spots.
There we go.
Because I really do think that we have to, let me back up for just a minute. I really do think we have to rethink how we're doing education. So many of us in here, and I have talked to many of you governors. I know that you're already on the same page, that all of you don't think that's necessarily to have a 4-year college education or to be successful. I think we are looking more at all of the different aspects that can get students in a productive educational environment to get them into the workforce. Because actually, I do think that from beginning to end, the goal is to get people into a productive job to support their family and to be parts of the community and the citizenry of the country. So I have already been working with the Secretary of Labor, Lori Chavez-DeRaymer, who is totally on board with this same concept. What we want to make sure is that there are pathways for students, not only students who are in school, but graduates for our unskilled labor force, maybe those who've been laid off. What is that reskilling technique that we should be looking at? There were, believe it or not, across government, I'm sure you're not shocked, but there were 43 programs of workforce development. So we've consolidated all of them now into the Department of Labor, where I think they readily belong. So the Department of Education has signed what's called a Memo of Understanding, which allows agencies to work together. We will provide much of the funding for the work that they're going to do, managing the workforce development area through the short-term Pell Grants, which were part of the big, beautiful bill. Also regular Pell Grants, also other apprenticeship programs. And I'm really pleased with this because I think we're going to see great success rates with having the Department of Labor, and they have a lot of statistical ability to provide for success and how those programs are going to run. So I'm delighted to be working with the Secretary of Labor, and the President has a great focus on this as well. You know, he's challenged Secretary of Labor to deliver 1 million new apprenticeship programs. He's hoping by the end of the year. So she's working on that incredibly hard. Now, this is on top of his first term. He challenged all of us. I was part of that committee when I was at the Small Business Administration to develop 1 million apprenticeships. So he's not saying, no, these are going forward. He's saying 1 million on top of those. So she's meeting with industry leaders. She's meeting with states. She's meeting with different governments too, to how can we make that work. And so we're working in conjunction with that. And I think as we look through, then if we look at the education part, you've talked so much about this, and I'm sure in sessions that you probably had earlier, about the pathway through our K through 12, through our middle schools and our high schools, with our dual credentials, stacking credentials, graduating from high school with already credits in community college or college. These are all of the new innovations that we need to embrace and make sure they're successful. I am 100% on board with that.
You know, as we make this or move towards this goal of 1 million apprenticeships, let's also focus on quality and make sure that it's not just a goal of numbers, because sometimes those are easier to reach, but if it's not meaningful, leading to better outcomes, it's in many ways a waste of everybody's time, the employer's time and the student's time. So how do we make sure we have good outcomes associated with all these additional apprenticeship opportunities? Colorado is very much focused on growing apprenticeships as well. We too want to figure this out around how we can make sure we're measuring the quality of that experience from both the learner's perspective, and of course ultimately it needs to be from the company's perspective too, because they're simply not going to participate if they're not seeing value in it.
Right.
So they need to see pipeline of talent for us, productivity today, part of the HR work, broader set we need to do to succeed. So we need to tie it into that as well.
We do, and so that gets down to the curriculum in schools, which is on the state and local level. What courses are being taught? I heard a couple of governors say today that, look, we want to get back to SHOP. We want to get back to some of those subjects that can be taught in school that have been eliminated that do go into the development of our workforce. And I think there are so many schools now who are re-embracing technology, shop skills, because we still need plumbers, electricians, HVAC folks, as well as we need aerospace people, teacher aides, all of that across the board. And the health service industry is so demanding in all of that.
Organizations like College Board now have AP cybersecurity certification, where students right in high school, and here in Adams 12 district as an example, helped pilot that. Students that right out of high school are able to get $100,000 plus jobs with the certification in cybersecurity that means something to today's and tomorrow's employers. So of course, as you indicated, those traditional trades are always going to be there. We're going to need people who are able to be electricians and plumbers, but we also have the jobs of tomorrow, many of which don't require a full four-year degree or advanced education. Vice Chair Stitt, if you'd like to open it up for the governors. I know we have a number of governors that want to join the discussion, and we'll start with the governor of Oklahoma, Governor Stitt.
Well, thank you so much. Thanks, Secretary, for being here. Thanks for releasing those funds out to the state. And I guess my big question, and you kind of talked about it for a second there, was on apprenticeships, internships. How do we take the career readiness and get it earlier and get kids exposed to more job opportunities earlier on in their career? How can we as governors help you with that initiative? Because we're totally on board with apprenticeships, and Governor Polis mentioned, let's make sure that they're also good. And they're productive, but how can we help you and kind of change that in our states? Because sometimes it's the parents that are pushing the kids to higher ed, and we don't see that maybe in Switzerland and Germany and some of these other countries that are really more focused on career readiness through apprenticeship. So we're on board, but we just want to figure out how we can help you with that.
Thank you, and I do think that that is a great coordination at the local level between the schools, the community, the industries and the businesses that are in your areas to open up what can happen. I know many industries now that have a public-private partnership with the schools. They will actually pay for some of the apprenticeships for those students who are in school. So they're training their next level of workforce while those students are earning their certificates or their diplomas or whatever they are. And so there's a ready, trained workforce to go right into industry. I know that Toyota has an incredible program in West Virginia at Bridge Valley Community College, and it's actually called the Toyota Center. But they also have a manufacturing plant down the road from the Toyota Center. So those students go, they work in the plant part-time during the week, but then they're in school and they're studying, and Toyota actually is paying for some portion of their hours of study, but yet when they leave the school and they go to Toyota at the plant, they're then paid to work on the plant floor. So it's offsetting the rest of their cost. So there are many, many, I think, symbiotic ways to work, with local manufacturing and industry and jobs and any of those connections. I think they are better driven, at the local level with governors and school superintendents, because in any way I can step in and be helpful or help match make, that is, I think, a really beneficial thing to be able to do.
In our state, we created a tax credit to help get apprenticeships off the ground from the employer side, because they do cost money to implement, and employers, with public company, they're looking at the quarterly results. If they're, maybe they're looking at a year or two if they're private, but apprenticeships, we make the case to them, of course, pay off and benefits to them, and ultimately they need to show that. But if we can help show that defray some of that initial cost of implementing an apprenticeship, we get broader pickup from the employers on the apprenticeships across many different sectors. I'd also encourage you to encourage your colleague, Secretary Lutnick, to engage in this work as well. Secretary Raimondo, former governor, really started down this road a couple of years ago, engaging commerce with employers. Just because the prior administration did it doesn't mean it's always wrong. So that would be one area where I would encourage him to dig up some of the transition memos and maybe talk to Secretary Raimondo and hopefully carry that torch forward from the employer side, where you can talk to employers and you've been one, but commerce is kind of where a lot of the businesses engage at that level, and we want them to be part of this conversation on apprenticeship.
Absolutely, and that was actually part of the first apprenticeship program that
Good.
President Trump had, because I remember working with Secretary Ross at the time.
Yes.
Some of those programs, and the president did issue an executive order, I think it was just 2 or 3 weeks ago, making it incumbent upon the Secretary of Education, the Secretary of Labor, and the Secretary of Commerce to develop a program for this workforce development. So we were already in process of doing that, but it is, we're all on board. Good point to have made on that.
That's right. Make sure to tell the president it was his idea, not Secretary Raimondo's idea or President Biden's idea. Okay.
Well, I was there for the first time, so
Yeah.
I can swear to that.
The work did start under that. Yes. Good.
Okay, thank you. Welcome, Madam Secretary. First of all, Governor Polis, on behalf of the governors from the U.S. territories, I want to thank you for making a statement for the CNMI Governor Polis, who passed away this week. We certainly appreciate that. Madam Secretary, I have an interesting point that I want to make. I was talking to my friend, Governor Green from Hawaii. In Hawaii, should the federal government cut its percentage of funding to the state, it'll take off maybe 10%. In my small territory in American Samoa, if the federal government cuts its funding to our territory, it's about 70%. I just want to make that point just so that you can remember far away, 8,000 miles from here, small territory. But the question that I want to ask, we have now PhDs and master's degrees as teachers in our, as a matter of fact, I brought my director of education so she could participate in this discussion. However, our elementary and middle school are failing in their performance in terms of accomplishment. They're like 4 years behind. Is there a program in the federal government that can help bring about to current the failing students, although my teachers are very well qualified?
Yeah, that's such a difficult, it's such a difficult problem. And the Secretary of Education and the government, the federal government, doesn't provide curriculum per se.
Okay.
That's really up, to the local level, the teachers, the governors, or the superintendents in those areas. That's not under what we do. We don't hire teachers. We don't buy books, that sort of thing. But what my goal is what the president has charged me to do in the process of returning education to the states, i.e. into the territories. I'm visiting all 50 states. I would like to come to the territories. I'm not sure I will get there in my short time frame. I have been to Puerto Rico 2 or 3 times. But what I would like to do and to leave really as my legacy, if you would, I say the group, it's a legacy that puts so much into this, is that I will have traveled around. I will have observed schools. I've seen different curriculums. I have looked at test scores. I know what works and what doesn't. What some governors are doing, they've had huge success with, how that might could help another state, because some states are going to do it better than others. And to present really best practices and a toolkit that can be used to say, wow, I think this could really work for me. I haven't tried that yet. Or I've tried part of that. Here's how I can help you, Department of Education, enhance your toolkit for others to follow. Okay. And I think that would probably be, of big help, but to look at, and you don't have to wait for me, because there are governors and other educators who clearly are innovative, doing that on their own, just as Governor Polis has talked about here in Colorado, and I have met with Governor Stitt and Governor Lee and several of the governors who've been innovative, and gotten NAEP scores up, put in programs relative to the science of reading. That may be something you want to take a look at. It's a different way to teach reading. It's kind of almost like a throwback to the way I learned to read. I don't know, Governor, if it's the way you learned to read or not, but it was based on phonetics, and it's a different way to learn. It's proven great success. So I offer that as a way to check it out.
The only thing I wanted to raise, I know time is short. I understand in Japan, first 4 years of students, there are no tests or examinations, but they teach students about respect, working in team levels and all that kind of stuff. That's something maybe I would like to explore.
So we address that in our report. Those are often in parlance here called soft skills, and absolutely employers value soft skills, teamwork, leadership, timeliness, all of those things, which to varying degrees they look at, but we absolutely want to lean into making sure that outcomes also includes the full suite of skills that employers value. And it's not just hard skills, right? You might be a good electrician, but if you're not showing up for work, you're not very good. So absolutely. Governor Moore.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon. And Madam Secretary, thank you so much for not just being here, because presence does matter in this, but also for all the time that you give them for the one-on-ones with the governors. We appreciate it. We know that, and I think about some of the things you mentioned before in Maryland, that we're very much an all-in on the science of reading, very much an all-in on making historic investments in apprenticeship programs, trade programs, et cetera. The thing we also know, though, is that for our students, their physical and their mental health does matter. In all of this as well. And so, we talked about coordination, we talked about creating those symbiotic relationships. Can you talk a little bit about both on what you've seen when it comes to screen time, technology for students and impacts? And the other thing is, what becomes the role of the Department of Education also in advocating for things like dental care, eye care, nutrition supports, supports on the child tax credits, because we have so many students who frankly are growing up in oftentimes generational poverty. What becomes the role and how do you see that symbiotic relationship between yourself and other agencies to make sure that if a kid is hungry, if a kid can't see, if a kid has dental problems, they're not going to learn regardless of who they have in front of the classroom?
Well, I wish the Department of Education could wave a magic wand and take care of all of that. However, I did meet with Secretary Kennedy. I think he was one of my last meetings just before I came on stage today. And he and I were talking about nutrition. And we talked about, the school lunch program that actually does fall under the Department of Agriculture, so we're all really working together. But he's always also talking about nutrition. He was telling me that many schools today don't even have kitchens. Or if they have kitchens, they just have the ability to warm up food that's prepackaged, et cetera. He mentioned Japan, by the way, and he said, they cook every single meal and it's all fresh food that comes in from gardens. And he's trying to encourage that, throughout our country, that we would have cooking of fresh food every single day, in our schools. Because he does absolutely see, as we all do, the connection between good nutrition, brain-forming cells that are going to be better than if a child is hungry and can't pay attention. All of the pesticides and everything that go into foods, he's really on top of that. And one of the things he was asking me is from the Department of Education side, what can I help do? I said, I can certainly be an advocate for you in talking about this, because we all want to work together. It is every agency and every department, I think, that is going to bolster, what we are doing. And when we're talking about childcare and those issues, those are legislative issues. So let's all continue to talk to our legislators about getting those things accomplished.
As a governor, I want to encourage you to work with them on improving the quality of school lunches. The national standards often set the market, and it's very hard for states, especially smaller states, but even moderate-sized states, to really do much that's different because of the scale of the production around meeting the federal requirements. So I know in general, and again, I speak just as a governor, not as chair of the whole NGA. I'm sure there's many different opinions on this, but I do think leaning into healthier standards for school lunches with, again, not imposing on us with our own money, but this is the money you're sending us, so you're perfectly entitled to tell us that we should do healthy, spend on healthy things. Otherwise, taxpayers face the brunt of increased healthcare costs and childhood obesity and diabetes. So I do encourage you to work with him on doing that, because it is something that it's very hard, if not impossible, for small and mid-sized states to do on our own, just because we can't get the scale to do that.
And I know he is working with Secretary Rollins at the Department of Agriculture for just those things as well. I think I just would like to say one thing. This is, I believe, the most collaborative cabinet that I can recall in a long time. All the agencies really do let each other know what we're working on, things that are coming up. And so I just want to let you know, if you bring things to our attention, we'll make sure it gets to where it needs to get. Hopefully you'll get responses. If not, please I'd like to know, because I'd like to get back to you.
Governor Gonzalez-Colon.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Secretary, for cutting the red tape and allowing states to control and have parents control of the Department of Education. We are witness of that, and thank you for your visit during the last years to Puerto Rico as well. I'm going to go following Governor Stitt's question. In the case of Puerto Rico, we need more than 50,000 workers for the construction and recovery of the island. So we are very focused in having those apprenticeships and the workforce prepared. I know that the one big, beautiful bill established the Pell Grant allowance to people for what have short-term careers or workforce. I know that deadline is going to be next year, but how can governors help the Department of Education and the Department of Labor to establish those or making the rules for making that program a success?
I think one of the things, it sounds like it would be self-evident, but one of the things, if you could communicate to us exactly what it is you need. I know you need workers, clearly, to do that. This is the time frame that you need them in. This is what's coming up. This is what the building is. And I remember when I was last in Puerto Rico, it was after the storms. I was at SBA then. And we were working with the Army Corps of Engineers as they were looking about reconstruction on the island. One of the things was just simply the electrical system. Well, we're going to put cable underground, so we're going to, as they called it, continue to have sticks and strings. And so if we know more information coming in about exactly what you need, we can look at it then to help structure what workforce could go in, where, is it working with different colleges? I know there are a lot of colleges that send down students, on like pro bono work to help with projects like that. So that kind of thing, information-wise, we'd like to be able to share.
Some education governors are born and some are made. We hope you're all made by implementing this report. But one who was born an education governor is Governor Meyer, TFA alumni, governor of the great state of Delaware. Governor Meyer.
Thank you, Governor Polis, and thank you. Thank you. That's quite an intro. I appreciate that, Governor. I didn't know I'd get that when I raised my hand, but I should take you everywhere with me. Secretary McMahon, thank you for your work and thank you for being here today. In my schooling, I'm not that old, but I learned on a chalkboard. When I became a teacher, they introduced something called a smart board, which was transformational for us as teachers. Just a couple days ago, the president signed a number of executive orders regarding artificial intelligence. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the transformational impact and the opportunities that you think. We hear a lot about the risks, but some of the opportunities that you think are out there to transform the educational opportunity for kids in all of our states through artificial intelligence.
Well, in a couple of weeks, I'm actually going to go to a school in Austin, Texas that has adopted a lot of AI learning, so I'll have more information. But just in what I have seen already, I was in a school, I honestly wish I could remember which state it was recently, and there was a teacher in a classroom. There were 25 computer screens. The screen matched each student in the room that was working on their computer on a particular math problem. And that teacher could monitor each student and see where their work was either ahead or behind of the other students in the class. And if she saw that someone was struggling, she'd go right to that student and figure out what that issue was. Now, that is a really very simple, maybe first step of some of that use, because she was able to raise the program for the student who could go on and have some of the artificial learning that was coming through the system go to that student that was ahead, or for the student that needed a little more review, she could back the program up so that the students in the classroom in that 1 hour time frame had the opportunity to work at their own rate and pace. But the important thing was the teacher was still needed in the classroom to help monitor that. So I think as we introduce AI, we have to figure out what is that right proportion of what can be accomplished, where we always, I believe, are going to need teachers in the classroom to be helpful, with the students. But those are a couple of small things that I've seen already. I'm about 6 months in, so I'm hoping to have a lot more information in the next 6 months. And that's not putting you off. I just wish I had more, but I'm going to learn very quickly.
So we just have about 4 more minutes. If I want to go through any other governors, and we'll give the Secretary a chance to respond. Who else wants to ask anything of the Secretary? If not, I'm always happy to for the final question and give her the remarks. Anybody else? Yes, please.
Madam Secretary, thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate your work, and thank you so much for releasing those funds. I would ask, as you've talked about giving states more flexibility with the existing framework that we have of regulatory framework, does the department anticipate giving us flexibility? For example, we ask for waivers in certain areas because, as you know, the innovation happens at the state level, and being able to use those federal dollars in the way that works best for each of our states, I think is helpful to every governor.
Well, thank you. And, our proposal in the upcoming budget is really going to be restructuring of the grant process. And so that it's streamlined, it'll be formulaically distributed, so that you don't have to hire all the grant writers, you don't have to do all of that kind of work. Save money because you're not going to be having to spend money complying with grant applications and grant monitoring, et cetera. You governors will know where you can send this money the best. Now, there may be parts that's not going to have a lot of red tape or regulatory regulations, but there will be some. But a governor like yourself could then ask for a waiver because you believe that you could use this here and it would do better. It's going to be, I think it is our anticipation that we'll be able to grant those waivers on a broad, wide basis.
Thank you.
So I want to give you the chance to close. I want to give you one kind of final area we haven't talked about as much, and that's early childhood education. Colorado decided that our friends in Oklahoma had a good thing going with universal preschool, so we followed suit. It was passed by 67% of our voters, rural, urban, red counties, blue counties. Everybody said kids ought to be able to go to preschool. And you mentioned, of course, the science around reading. There's also strong scientific evidence showing the importance of quality early childhood education. I want to give you the chance to address how we can better partner with the administration to move forward with our earliest learners, birth to 4, but particularly as obviously special education services often starting at 2. And then, of course, give you the chance to close on whatever topic you'd like.
Well, thank you very much. I would like to see education start as early as we can. And those homes that have parents who have the ability, who are there and have their own experience, that are reading to their children and showing them, all of those kinds of things, toys that are hands-on, that are learning toys. We see that progression with those children. And if those children go to preschool, they're light years ahead of the child that starts in kindergarten or first grade. So I think that's really a legislative issue to continue to work with. And so I want to continue to work with the states and talk to you about that as to how we can, if it really rests with a state issue, or if we want to expand it. So I'd like to have more information about that. So if, please reach out to me, let's talk. And as I make my tour around the country, because I do intend to go to every single state, and I'll let you know when I'm going to be in your state. I'd love to work with you when I'm there. If I can, I'll come back to the state more than one time. And what do you want to show me when I'm there? What questions you want to have? I would be so interested in seeing that. And as I wrap up, first of all, I would just like to thank you for the opportunity of meeting with as many of the governors who have been here. And I have already been to a few states and seen some governors who aren't here. If education is going to be returned, not if, when education is returned, to the states in full, I mean, after all, you already provide about 90% of the budget for your education. But that last piece, I can think of no better place to be or no better place to start than to talking and working with the governors in those states so that I can learn what is best for you, what obstacles that you have, just as you and I discussed, Governor Polis, and have the opportunity to visit your special schools. Are you setting up more micro schools? Are you opening more charter schools? If you want to open more charter schools, what do you need to be able to do that? And I do think that rising tide lifts all boats, and I think we will see our public schools, I think their scores will raise as well, because competition is a good thing. And we've seen from most of the states who do open more charter schools around their states, we do see more and more progress being made in education. So I want to work with you. I want to be as helpful as I possibly can. I want to help provide you with best practices and toolkits for your states.
And by the way, on the topic, you mentioned charter schools. Many of those couldn't have gotten off the ground without the Title V charter school startup grants to the department. So we hope that's one of the things you preserve, protect, support, increase. As you know, they're not exactly cash flow neutral or positive for the first couple of years, and many of them would not happen without those Title V grants. Thank you.
And we did increase it by $60 million in the big, beautiful bill. So that was a good thing, too.
Again, thank you. That's all the time we have. Thank you, Secretary McMahon, for joining us for this very important conversation. Let's give the Secretary a warm round of applause.
Thank you.
And thank you so much.
It was a pleasure. Thank you. I'll be back in touch.
We'll see you soon.